And welcome to Cold War Radio, ladies and gentlemen, live on our home base. WAAR, we are America Radio, your number one source for streaming political and government talk anywhere. I'm Hutch Bailey Jr., deep down in the bunker in my Smith & Wesson studio in the city of Pittsburgh, in the state of Pennsylvania, États-Unis, and west of Murmansk, Russia, with a Finnish and Swedish buffer in between. Let's welcome Radio Norway to the program. Come in, Radio Norway. And I don't have Radio Norway. I don't know if he went. Let's see if we still have contact. It seems to.
Are you there, Hutch?
There he is. Come in, Radio Norway. It must have been the Aurora Borealis or the D layer of the atmosphere, the ionosphere, or whatever. Hello, Radio.
A big hello to our Spreaker chat room, the most awesome radio audience. There is a big hello to our podcast listeners and everybody else. And a big hello back to the land of the ladybugs and fireflies, the Keystone State, and the director of the Bunker Munitions Factory producing prime quality A ammo for the war of ideas, Mr. Hutch Bailey Jr. Good evening, Hutch.
Wow, you practiced that, brother. That was pretty good, no doubt. Follow me on Spreaker, ladies and gentlemen. Like the Facebook page, facebook.com/Cold War Radio, 2 A's in war. You can catch the show on Blueberry, Roku, YouTube. Cold War Radio is an iHeartRadio program. There's a Cold War Radio app free in your app store, no matter what your device. The email is hutch@steelcityresistance.com, and the Cold War Radio patron hotline is activated at 412-567-1460. Chat room is up on Spreaker. Go there, go to steelcityresistance.com. Catch the show notes. You're going to need that tonight because we're not going to be able to say all this stuff. You're going to have to do a little homework after the show. You can become a Cold War Radio patron. That would be very appreciated by the show. And you can send mail to Hutch Bailey Jr., P.O. Box 96022, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15226. Ladies and gentlemen, you know tonight, Monday night, is Shaping Our World. It's the evening that we try to bring pieces of history that aren't normally talked about and try to show you how they affect what's going on today. And tonight is a very good example of that. We're going to talk about the 1930s and the Japanese Empire's rampage across Asia, especially China, but not only China, and how that affects our world today. It's a very interesting subject, and we think you're going to like it. Let's take it away.
Господин представитель, это что, для вас открытие? Весь мир знает, что самая империалистическая держава – это Соединенные Штаты Америки. Об этом все воробьи на крышах чирикают, что самая империалистическая держава, которая поддерживает колониальный режим в колониях, это Соединенные Штаты Америки. А он возмущен. Какая, так сказать, невинность, понимаете, разыгрывается здесь, в то время, когда знает, что эта невинная барышня уже, наверное, десяток имеет детей.
Ich richte diesen Appell an alle unsere Volksgenossen, die an unseren Staat und an unser Reich glauben. Würdest du allein stehen, was wärst du denn auf dieser Welt? Und dein Gehalt, dein Lohn, du eine große Gemeinschaft bist, jedem Einzelnen mit verdammt zu lassen. Sage mir nicht, ja, das ist doch prächtig, immer die Zusammenhang. Du hast nie den Hunger kennengelernt, was nur du bist, die letzte Hose.
Too weak to master the new conditions of life must give way. They must perish in the revolutionary Holocaust, Karl Marx. the left in general, fundamentally opposed Nazism, because Hitler had distorted Marxism beyond recognition. Gassing people based on their nationality was absolutely inexcusable. The selection should be based on class. Hitler got it all wrong. Absolutely different people needed to be killed. The only true Marxist country on earth was the Soviet Union. It exterminated, strictly according to Marx's teaching, the class enemies.
और टूट अंग कहने की रट छोड़ दो, अब वो दौर नहीं रहा। जिहाद का दौर शुरू हो चुका है और तुम्हें 71 का जमाना याद है और आज जिहाद का दौर शुरू हो चुका है। जिहाद के सामने ना रूस ठहर सका ना अमेरिका ठहर सका, इंशाल्लाह इंडिया नहीं ठहरेगा। ये जिहाद का दौर शुरू हो चुका है। जिहाद को दुनिया नहीं जानती, जिहाद को लोग नहीं समझते। अब भाइयों सुन लो, जिहाद मुल्कों से जंग नहीं होती, फौजों की फौजों से जंग नहीं, असले की असले से जंग नहीं होती। जब जिहाद होता है तो जमीन आसमान के दरमियान जंग होती है, मदद सारी आसमानों
And here we go with Shaping Our World on Cold War Radio on Monday night. Radio Norway, over to you.
Yeah, well, we talked about it in the chat room yesterday on the eminent show Steel City Resistance with you and Jack at Mountain. And I was wondering, I asked my friends in the chat room there why so few people call into our show on Mondays. And several said they were intimidated. They were afraid to call in. And I would just add that I have had several professors throughout the times saying that there is no such thing as a dumb question. Well, I would beg to differ, because if you call in and start quizzing me about the weather in northern Norway, that's a dumb question. But pretty much every other question goes. And if you have comments, and if you have a really hot topic that doesn't touch on our program on Mondays, please call in. The number is 412-567-1460.
And I'll give the ugly American version of that we use in the United States Army. The only dumb question is the one that doesn't get asked.
Exactly.
That's the way we roll it.
So call in, folks. Give a couple of brothers a hand here.
And we won't lie to you. If we don't know, we'll tell you. I mean, we're just trying to do our best here to correct something that we feel that our educational institutions have fallen flat on. And you know, it's really hard. I was thinking about this earlier, Norway, when I see these people in Washington that are like 30, 35, 40 years old, and they're dealing with Asia and different parts of the world. I'm thinking they don't know anything. They have no idea. They have not been, and this isn't all of them, but for a lot of them, I'm especially like media people. I'm thinking you are so clueless. You have no ammunition. You don't know you don't know the difference between a Chinese and a Korean and a Japanese. You know, but anyway, so that's one of the reasons we're trying to do this. Now, I will say right off the bat that I've put some full-length documentaries on the Facebook page that you can check this out in graphic detail. One of the things that sets the rape of Nanking, or the rape of Nanjing, as the Chinese pronounce it, apart is the brutality that they suffered under Japanese occupation and invasion. And that is fully depicted in the documentaries on the Facebook page. Also, the clips, where possible, are also the video version of them are at the Facebook page. So you don't want to miss that after the show, of course, unless you turn the volume down. But the history of Nanjing Massacre was hardly known to the Western world before a Chinese-American writer and historian's book came out 15 years ago. Iris Chang's book, named The Rape of Nanking, also illustrated how the world can forget entire periods of history, even though hundreds of thousands of people are slaughtered. Due to depression, Iris Chang, or Chong, committed suicide 7 years after her book was published. However, her legacy to the world lives on. Producer, let's listen a little bit about this book and the events that caused it to be written.
Well, Thursday is 75 years since the Nanjing Massacre. Japanese troops killed 300,000 people, what was then the national capital. Its history and story was hardly known to the Western world before a Chinese-American writer and historian published a book about it 15 years ago. Iris Chang's book is called The Rape of Nanjing. It illustrated the way in which the world can forget entire periods of history, no matter how many people are victims. Iris Chang herself committed suicide 7 years after her book was published, but her legacy lives on. CCTV correspondent Wu Hanying has this story from Washington.
A journalist, a historian, and a best-selling author, Iris Chang was one of the most prominent Chinese-American authors of her time. Yet on a fateful day in November 2004, Chang shot herself dead with a handgun.
We can't believe she would do this.
In early days after she passed away, Ying and I could hardly live on. We were so sad.
A native of New Jersey, Chang was born into a family of Chinese immigrants. After studying journalism in college, Chang started as a reporter for the Associated Press and later New York Times. But it was in writing where Chang found her true passion. After a number of books documenting the experiences of Chinese Americans, Chang in 1997 wrote her most famous book to date, The Rape of Nanking. It was the height of World War II when the Japanese troops invaded the city of the eastern Chinese city, systematically raping, torturing, and killing more than 300,000 Chinese civilians. The book tells the story of the Japanese soldiers who did it, of the Chinese civilians who endured it, and of a group of Americans who refused to abandon the city and stayed to save lives. Among them was a lady named Minnie Vautrin.
She took over as master of the Jinling Girls' College, established the safety zone in downtown of Nanjing. She saved the lives of more than 200,000 Chinese civilians. She later found the offsprings of John Rape in Berlin and found Rape's diaries. How the Japanese tortured Chinese, she described it as the hell. They have very detailed descriptions.
The rape of Nanking brought global attention, was believed to be a forgotten Holocaust of World War II. Chang's book and accounts like that lends new perspectives to many historians who now believe what the Japanese did in Nanjing was comparable to what Nazi Germany did to the Jews in Europe. In 2007, a documentary was dedicated to Chang by two-time Oscar-winning director Bill Guttentag.
When Iris Chang's book came out, hundreds of thousands of people bought that book, and they read it, and they learned about it, and they learned about the power of it, they learned about the tragedy, and they learned about the heroism of both the foreigners and the Chinese, and they learned, that about this important world event. And I think all of us owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Iris Chang.
Last year, Chang's mother published her own book in memory of her daughter. The book was called The Woman Who Could Not Forget.
The power of one, people will say, how can one person make differences? She believes in the power of one. Thus, she says one person can start a war or subvert an entire power structure. Do not limit your vision and do not ever compromise your dreams or ideals. This is very moving. Every time I will read about this part.
Wu Hanying, CCTV, America.
So there you go. There's a little background, ladies and gentlemen. And one of the things that really stands out about this, I said earlier about the brutality of the atrocities. I mean, you can look at one of the several pictures for tonight's episode that's on Twitter, as far as the promos, and the Muslims don't have anything on the Japanese when it comes to beheading. Norway. I'm telling you,
they come out pretty evenly when it comes to that, and Minnie Watrin, who was mentioned in this sound clip, she was a missionary. She ran the Jinling College, a Christian college for girls over in Nanking, and she suffered a nervous breakdown in 1940 and returned to the United States. And a year to the day after leaving Nanking, she committed suicide.
And you got to understand the backdrop of this is that you've probably never heard of Nanking or Nanjing, but it was the capital of China during this period. I mean, this is where the most people in China lived.
It was the capital of China, and I must say, when you brought up this idea for a show, I had heard about the Nanking massacre, but when I started digging into it, I was absolutely horrified to see the documentation, and it is really stomach churning.
It is.
We made a few posters for the show today, but I simply couldn't share them. They were too horrible.
And I mean, some of if you don't talk about them, it's like female genital mutilation. If you don't want to talk about it, but if you don't talk about it, it never happened. And that's the way it is here. These Japanese, and the reason that I'm doing this, I'll tell you in just a second. I'm gonna cover a couple of the things that they did regularly. One of them, they were especially brutal to babies. They would take babies and they would make the mothers watch, and they would throw one up in the air, and all the infantrymen had bayonets fixed, and they would catch them with the bayonet, and then they would throw them to each other like lacrosse, but with the bayonet sticking through them. I mean, this was done on a regular basis. They would make families watch as their women were raped by soldiers. I mean, you could see pictures of piles of human heads. They must have had beheading parties, and they did it with samurai swords. It wasn't the sawing off as you see with the Islamic animals. It was quick, but it was done nonetheless. I mean, it was just they would do things to these people that were so brutal. Let's listen to a clip that describes this a little bit, and then we're going to talk about an article by Andrew Carroll, and then I'm going to try to get you to understand why this is so doggone important.
Genocide is the deliberate and systematic extermination of a particular group of people.
The Nanking Massacre of 1937 was just that, the mass murder and war rape of Chinese civilians committed by the Japanese Imperial Army in the city of Nanjing, China. During the massacre, hundreds of thousands of civilians were tortured, raped, and killed over the course of 6 weeks.
An estimated 20,000 women, including children and elderly, were raped by soldiers and oftentimes killed by use of extreme mutilation, bayonet, and bamboo stabbings. Soldiers forced incest between families and used children as bait to lure in mothers and fathers.
Chinese refugees often tried to escape the Yangtze River but were cut down by machine guns or drowned. Prisoners of war and civilian executions continued at the river, and bodies soon became uncountable.
As well as organized rape and killings, Japanese soldiers burned, looted, and destroyed Nanjing City itself. Once prosperous and beautiful city was now dust and ash.
An international committee created the Nanking Safety Zone, which tried but ultimately failed at protecting civilians. Even with over 20 refugee camps, Japanese soldiers continued to rape and slaughter Chinese men, women, and children. This occurred until Japanese soldiers eventually had to move and continue the war elsewhere.
By the end of World War II, several key perpetrators were labeled as war criminals, later tried and found guilty, and executed at the Nanking War Crimes Tribunal. This excluded Prince Asaka, who had imperial family immunity and was exhumed from prosecution. Sadly, only 2 individuals were actually charged, found guilty, and sentenced to death.
While there can be no exact death toll numbers, it is estimated that 300,000 Chinese citizens were murdered. There has been much denial on behalf of the Japanese government and controversy about the rape of Nanking. Some suggest it was fabricated entirely for propaganda use, or at least all the events were exaggerated.
Sadly, to this day, Sino-Japanese relations continue to be strained and unresolved over the tragic and horrific treatment of Chinese civilians that took place during the Japanese occupation.
And this is the part that makes me a little bit nervous, because we have this historic massacre, and it wasn't just there. We're going to go into a little other place where it happened also. But now you have the United States of America standing with Japan against the rest of these Oriental countries that were brutalized by her. And you have a situation in the South China Sea. And one of the things that we were talking about before the program is, I don't like to use the word Asian. That's a misleading term. Asia is a big continent. I think it's the biggest continent. And there's many non-Oriental countries inside Asia. I'm talking about Orientals. They hold a grudge, ladies and gentlemen. They hold a grudge. They've been around a lot longer than we have. And they have centuries of history amongst each other. And there is no love lost between Japan and any of these other countries, China, Korea, what have you, Philippines. This is something that Americans tend to have we can change our minds real quick. You talk to people like the ones I was speaking about in Washington, they think Japan's always been our ally. And they're the good guy. They were some brutal animals.
Yeah, the number is 412-567-1460. We love to hear your thoughts on the subject. And I totally agree with you here, Hutch. But I think also there is a schism between the military part of Japan during the war and the civilian part. And you saw this divide when the 2 atomic bombs were dropped on Japan. The military, they refused to give up, and they were prepared to send the civilian masses into the slaughter to defend the homeland. Absolute fanaticism, and that shows in the first article we have on the table here today. This article by Andrew Carroll you mentioned.
Yeah, it's from World War II War Letters. After capturing the Chinese capital of Nanking in December 1937, Japanese troops raped and executed hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians. And you heard in the clip, only 2 people paid for that. The brutal campaign became known as the Nanking Massacre, or the Rape of Nanking. The most detailed descriptions of the episode come from letters and diaries by Western missionaries who stayed in the city, especially Reverend James McCallum, a 44-year-old American working at a hospital in the safety zone, a demilitarized enclave run by Westerners. These were some of the heroes of Nanking. They could have left, and they decided to stay there. And at the whim of the Japanese Imperial Army, they decided to try to set this enclave up, and they were able to do that. But he wrote the following account on December 29th, which he mailed to his family. Have been so busy every day and 5 nights of the week that I have had no time to write. A foreigner must be on duty 24 hours here at the hospital in order to deal with the Japanese visitors. It is snowing and bitterly cold. Our hospital is full, and the lighter cases fill the university dormitory building. Some we cannot dismiss because they have nowhere to go. Thought of all of you on Christmas Day, and hoped it was a happy time for you. We presumed you were still in Kuling. We have been completely out of touch with the rest of the world. No one can get into Nanking, and it seems very difficult to get out. We have talked of sending someone of our group out to carry the news of the terrible things that have been and are still happening here, but know that person would never get back if he once left. All of us have been doing double duty. Let's go down here and see if we can find some of the details here. Every foreign house is a sight to behold, untouched until the Japanese army arrived, nothing untouched since. Every lock has been broken, every trunk ransacked. Their search for money and valuables has led them to the flues and inside pianos. Our phonograph records are all broken. The dishes are in a broken mess on the floor, along with everything else that was discarded after each looting. Nanking presents a dismal appearance. At the time the Japanese army entered the city, little harm had been done to buildings. Since then, the stores have been stripped of their wares, most of them burned. Taiping, Changhua, and practically every other main business road is a mass of ruins. In South City, much of the area back of Main Street has also been burned. We see new fires every day and wonder when such beastly destruction will cease. But far worse has been happening to the people. They have been in terror, and no wonder. Many of them have nothing left now but a single garment around their shoulders. Helpless and unarmed, they have been at the mercy of the soldiers, who have been permitted to roam about at will wherever they pleased. There is no discipline whatever, and many of them are drunk. By day they go into the buildings in our safety zone centers looking for desirable women, then at night they return to get them. If they have been hidden away, the responsible men are bayoneted on the spot. Girls of 11 and 12, women of 50, have not escaped. Resistance is fatal. A woman 6 months pregnant who resisted came to us with 16 knife wounds in her face and body, one piercing the abdomen. She lost her baby, but her life will be spared. And that's just a touch of what went on here. You can catch, again, the full load at the show notes links. This is CWR 493, coming up on 500 there, Norway.
Yeah, it's a big show, the 22nd of August with, we'll do a 2-hour show with
Stacey Rush
and me and guests, and it will be a blast. So looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Now, so all of this happened and the war ended, and now we're trying to get back to normal, and China has a case of the ass. They're still mad about this, as they should be. And a lot of people still are. So what China did in 2016 was they took their case, what does this stand for, to UNESCO, the United Nations ESCO.
ESCO, yeah.
It's a thing about history that gets things that happen documented, is what it is. And China takes its case to UNESCO, and then Japan halts UNESCO funding following Nanjing Massacre Row. Let's listen to them taking it to UNESCO, and we will go from there.
The UNESCO panel has begun its initial examination to include sets of documents related to the 1937 Nanjing Massacre and Japan's wartime use of sex slaves on its Memory of the World programme. The decision is expected to be made this week. Son Jung-in has more.
The Nanjing Massacre was one of the darkest events of the 20th century. Over 300,000 Chinese men, women, and children were slaughtered by Japanese troops in the city of Nanjing in 1937. In June of last year, the Chinese government submitted an application to enlist on UNESCO's Memory of the World program 11 sets of documents related to the massacre and the issue of about 200,000 sex slaves, mostly Koreans, used by Japanese soldiers before and during World War II. On Sunday, the UNESCO International Advisory Committee opened a meeting in the United Arab Emirates to examine them and 90 other nominations for documentary heritage enlistment. Due to the sensitivity of the issue, the advisory members were reluctant to give any details.
We have been told not to comment on anything. Really? Ask her. UNESCO.
No, we cannot comment anything.
Until we finish
UNESCO's Director General will make a final approval based on the result of the panel discussion.
I believe that you all have some responsibilities to carry out today.
Japan has lodged a protest against the move and asked China to withdraw the nomination, questioning the authenticity of the materials. Amid rising tension between the two countries, the international panel is expected to announce its decision later in the week.
So there, the big teeth of the UN are into it now, and Japan halts UNESCO funding from Agence France Presse in Tokyo. This is from 2016 in October. Japan is holding back more than £34 million in the UNESCO funding following a protest against a listing of documents related to the Nanjing Massacre. Have you ever noticed, Norway, that Japan can never admit anything it did?
Yeah, well, I think this is really a complex picture. I think this is one of the most complex pictures in world history, because on the one hand, I don't have a single shred of doubt that these massacres happen. I mean, they're well documented, and but on the other hand, the Japanese pride, which is there is nationalism and there is nationalism, if you know what I mean, and I think that Japanese pride in some way protects them today better than what happened in Germany. Which is the other equivalent in this equation. And if you look at Germany, they've self-flagellated themselves horribly, and let people like Angela Merkel in to destroy the country. And when you look at Japan, I think there is 0.05%, something like that, of Muslims in the country today. So. And that is because they recognize that they want to be alone. They want to be themselves, and I think that is the good nationalism. But when you have massacres like the Nanking massacres, and you see how this Tojoism, which was called named after their leader Tojo. Totally out of control and absolutely horrifying to see what the Japanese troops in general did throughout Asia.
And this is a perfect example of when you take God out of the leadership and you put in Emperor Hirohito and Hideki Tojo. They worship these men. I mean, when my father was in post-war Japan, luckiest soldier in the world, 46 to 50. He got into Japan right after it was over and got out of there before they went to Korea. But he said they worshiped MacArthur after MacArthur basically took over for Hirohito as the emperor, as the religious figure that they worshipped. It's something when that happens, and you can trace that throughout history. That when a people start worshiping a man, bad things happen every time. But yeah, you got a point about that to the extent. But the thing is that Nanking, although it is a very important event, especially because of how early it started, most Americans weren't even aware of this going on at the time until the real late 30s. But when Hitler showed his face, but this is only the tip of the iceberg of what the Japanese Empire did in the region. I mean, some of the things were just really bad. But anyway, Japan, one of UNESCO's biggest funders, warned last year that it might pull the funding after the UN cultural and scientific body, which is UNESCO, agreed to Beijing's request to register disputed Chinese documents recording the mass murder and rape committed by Japanese troops after the fall of the Chinese city of Nanjing in 1937. The documents were inscribed in the UN body's Memory of the World list. The massacre is an exceptionally sensitive issue in the often tense relations between Japan and China, with Beijing charging that Tokyo has failed to atone for the atrocity. And that was my point. They failed to atone for all of their atrocities. Just about. But guess what? They reneged. Japan pays UNESCO dues after reforms soften the ire over Nanjing massacre documents. From Reuters. That last article was from October. This is from December in 2016. Japan has made its annual contribution to UNESCO after withholding the funds over the UN Heritage Body's decision to include documents of Nanjing Massacre in its Memory of the World program. Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida said Thursday, citing UNESCO reforms as the reason for the change of heart. 412-567-1460. What do you guys think? What are you thinking about the show? Is this a worthy topic? I think after we get into the next couple segments, you're going to think so.
Yeah, absolutely. The number is 412-567-1460. Help us out here. Let us know what you think about this topic. And if you have any questions, ideas, please share them with us.
Now there's look at that. Caught me off guard. 304. Let's wait till they get in here. They'll be in here in just a second. 304. You are on the air. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Terry. I'm calling from Virginia. And I just appreciate all the work that you and Norway put into these programs because it's very informative about history. But listening to this about China and Japan, I think about China. If we'd go back in the history of China, I mean, they've probably done things like this themselves. And probably every nation in the world. I mean, what we've done as Americans, we would not be proud of either. And the way I feel about things right now, I appreciate learning about this and finding out how evil everybody has been in the past. And I think it's time for people to just grow up and let's put this behind us and let's just find some peace in the world. And that's the way I feel about it.
Norway? Norway?
Yeah, well, I think that's... I'm a bit ambivalent in that regard because... Well, and thank you for the compliment. Much appreciated. I think I'm a bit ambivalent in regards to this because those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that is a lesson we cannot forget. And further into the program, you understand why we brought up this. Sure.
And I value that information. And just like what you did with South Africa and all of this kind of information, it's very, very important. And but at the same time too. You understand what I'm saying, you know, that it's time that we acknowledge these things and admit these things and then try to just not do these things anymore. That's where I'm coming from.
Well, and that's a great opinion. I will say, Patty, Terry, that the reason...
It's Terry,
I said I corrected it. Sorry about that. But the reason that we want to do these things is because it affects what's going on today, and I'm going to bring that in the next segment.
Exactly.
I did like
I understand that.
With South Africa, the thing was the thing that made that come to the forefront for me was watching that embarrassing funeral for Nelson Mandela. When I saw that state funeral, that you would have thought he was Ronald Reagan. And that just...
Yes, or someone even more powerful than him.
Right.
So, yes.
Well, hey, thanks for the call.
I appreciate you guys. And I look for the day when there's peace on the earth. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Right. Thanks for the call, Terry. All right. So do we. I mean, but until we get there, let's be ready. You know, let's make sure we know what we're dealing with. Great call. Thank you to Terry from Virginia. Now, I want to talk about Korea as a colony of Japan, because China met Japan's bayonets in 1937. Korea met them in 1910. Korea, and the reason I say this, think about what's going on today. North Korea, South China Sea, China, Japan, the Philippines, Duterte, you know, all these things, they lived in the area where all this stuff happened. We sent troops overseas. Korea, and this is from Asia for Educators, Columbia University, The Japanese colonial rule 1910 to 1945 was a deeply ambivalent experience for Koreans. On the one hand, Japanese colonialism was often quite harsh. For the first 10 years, Japan ruled directly through the military, and any Korean dissent was ruthlessly crushed. After a nationwide protest against Japanese colonialism that began on March 1st, 1919, Japanese rule relaxed somewhat, allowing a limited degree of freedom of expression for Koreans. Despite the often oppressive and heavy-handed rule of the Japanese authorities, many recognizably modern aspects of Korean society emerged or grew considerably during the 35-year period of colonial rule. These included rapid urban growth, the expansion of commerce and forms of mass culture, such as radio and cinema, which became widespread for the first time. Industrial development also took place, partly encouraged by Japanese colonial state, although primarily for the purposes of enriching Japan and fighting the wars in China and the Pacific, rather than to benefit the Koreans themselves. Such uneven and distorted development left a mixed legacy for the peninsula after the colonial period ended. By the time of the Japanese surrender in August 1945, Korea was the second most industrialized nation in Asia after Japan itself. Now, I can tell you that if you look at Japanese rifles, Norway, of the World War II era, you will see that they are more than one piece of lumber that is banded together. It's because Japan ran out of trees. And so did Korea. When I was in Korea in 1985, the biggest tree was 6 inches around, because the Japanese took every tree. Every tree. The Japanese took Korean women.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and you see that after, well, actually, if you go back to, I think it is 12. Well, don't arrest me on this, but it's the 1280s, 1281, 82, something like that. Everybody's heard about the kamikaze, the divine wind. And it was actually a typhoon that blew the 140,000 strong Chinese or Mongol rather fleet that sailed over to Japan, trying to take the Japanese homeland. So and after that followed about the 600-year period of seclusion where Japan kept themselves to themselves, and then you have some opening up from the 1600s and forward. You have some opening up to Western impulses. Actually, quite a lot of cooperation with the American Navy and later on the American Army. So they started to open up for other impulses, but they were secluded for a long time, and they depleted their resources. So when we come to 1910, they start invading neighboring countries. Korea, I think, had it relatively easy, and they've been a strong nation for 3,330 some years, but they met their match when the Japanese came. But I think still they were treated moderately better than the Chinese.
Except that they left them with no food. They took every piece of livestock out of the country, every tree. You hear of Koreans eating bulgogi, eating dog meat. They also ate cat meat and mouse. They ate because there was nothing else to eat, was the reason why they did that. A lot of people, Americans, think that they do this because they love it or something. It's very expensive. It's not something, this is something that they eat to remember the 30s, especially the 30s. The 30s and 40s is when they took whole villages of women, shipped them to Japan or shipped them to where the Japanese soldiers were, and they were called comfort women. You can look that up. They used them for Japanese soldiers' pleasure. But they also banned Hanguk, which is the native language of Korea. You were not allowed to speak Korean during the occupation, and the people that were sent, one of the biggest companies to use slave labor from Korea was Mitsubishi. And the people that got sent were the ones that couldn't speak Japanese. Japanese was the official language of Korea during this time frame, and the people that got sent were the ones that didn't comply with that rule or couldn't comply. But again, the main reason I say all this, where did Kim Jong-un fire his first missile? Toward Japan. You know, this is something that, he's crazy, and sending a missile over there is crazy. But these people suffered immensely under the Japanese and the Chinese as well. And it's just good to understand these things when you're watching things play out in this region. Because a lot of times we go in there ham-handed. We did it in Iraq. You know, when we took down the entire Shiite infrastructure of the government and the security forces with one letter that what was his name? Bremer? Whoever was running the civilian side of the State Department in Iraq, when they de-Baathified the government and took all those Shiites out, instead of, if they would have just listened to history, if they would have just watched what Patton did with the SS, and if they would have watched what MacArthur did with the military in Japan, and they would have just made them work for us instead of disbanding them, overnight Paul Bremer created the insurgency over stupidity.
And this is really the core of what we're trying to do here, because you're absolutely right. With a little bit more historical knowledge and learning from history, learning from Germany, learning from Japan, and what the great American military leaders did in these instances, and also understanding the doctrines of Islam, this whole debacle could have been avoided. We wouldn't have had we wouldn't have Islamic State growing out of the woodworks, and I am absolutely convinced that we would have much more peace and stability in the region.
Absolutely. And not only that, but you look at South Africa, Europe, you better pay attention to South Africa, because that's what's happening to you. If you look at what's going on in South Africa, and you look at the African migrants that happen to be Muslim, that are moving ever closer to the hearts of your countries, you better pay attention. That's just absolutely. It's the way it is. 412-567-1460. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say the number 412-567-1460, but there it is again.
Norway. How about talking a little bit about the Flying Tigers and Claire Chennault?
Oh yeah. Let's do that. I brought, when you have read about a 13-year-old girl that refused to be raped and she was split down the middle by these savages, I mean, I just needed a positive story, and that positive story is the American volunteer group under the leadership of General Claire L. Chennault, and they were called the Flying Tigers down the line. A handful of American mercenaries who scorched earth and sky in defense of China were officially known as the American Volunteer Group, AVG. But of course, they're best remembered as the Flying Tigers, the English translation of Fei Hu. The nickname was bestowed by the grateful Chinese after the American pilots attacked a large number of Japanese fighters over Kunming on December 20th, 1941. In just 7 months of intense aerial combat, the AVG earned a lasting niche in aviation history, reportedly destroying nearly 300 Japanese aircraft for the loss of only 69 planes.
That's my kind of numbers right there.
Absolutely. They had a staggering kill ratio, and that these they downed 296 confirmed kills, but they had also 300 more probable kills. Japan lost 1,500 pilots, bombardiers, navigators, and gunners in the air combat. The AVG also destroyed 573 bridges, 1,300 riverboats, and innumerable road vehicles, and killed thousands of Imperial Japanese army soldiers. And the total losses of the AVG were 69 planes and 25 pilots.
And you look at the makeup in the creating of his legendary group of airmen. It's composed of former U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, and Army Air Corps pilots who quietly entered China, posing as artists and missionaries. Chennault established his own version of an ideal mercenary band. To him, it was clear that paid soldiers could play a vital role in aerial combat, and in his attempts to sell his sometimes radical ideas to military officials, he frequently quoted lines from Epitaph on an Army Mercenary, his favorite A.E. Houseman poem.
These in the day when heaven was falling, the hour when earth's foundation fled, following their mercenary calling, took their wages and are dead. Their shoulders held the sky suspended. They stood an earth's foundation stay. What God abandoned, these defended, and saved the sum of things for pay.
So, I mean, this initially began, like we said, the Nanking Massacre was 1937, but they were under attack since 1931, when, as Norway stated, a resource-depleted Japan took advantage of an opportunity to invade Manchuria. Torn by many years of civil war and battles between warlords, the Chinese found it beyond their power to halt the Japanese aggression, which escalated in the following years. The world's three great powers, the United States, Britain, and France, tried to influence the Japanese through diplomatic dialogue, efforts that had had little effect on Japan and largely failed to muster any interest from other nations. The carnage continued as the Japanese swept nearly unopposed across the fertile agricultural plains of eastern China. Peking and Shanghai quickly succumbed during ruthless attacks on strategic military targets and civilian population centers. So the Flying Tigers, their story actually began at that time when Captain Claire Lee Chennault formed and led the U.S. Army Air Corps Precision Flying Team in performances across the United States. Chennault, who was born in 1890 and grew up in Louisiana, had tried unsuccessfully to become a pilot during World War I. The war ended before he had his wings, but he spent the post-war years honing his skills as an aerobatic flyer and working on aerial maneuvers, especially the use of three-plane teams. Virtuoso teamwork was the highlight of the Army's flying team. Calling themselves three men on a flying trapeze, Chennault, joined by Staff Sergeants Billy McDonald and J.H. Williams, flew Boeing P-12 biplanes. The peppy little aircraft were equipped with 450 horsepower engines and could achieve a top speed of 194 miles an hour. So that's where he started, and then he ended up a general and served 20 years in the U.S. Army Air Corps, partially deaf from many years of open cockpit flying. He retired, and the aerobatics team was disbanded, but in the audience at their last performance was a spectator who would have an important role in Chennault's next career, Chinese Air Force General Mao Pang-tso. Chinese nationalist leader Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek needed a talented, experienced aviator to lead and organize his country's struggling air force, which was attempting to help the Chinese ground troops stop the invading swarms of Imperial Japanese soldiers ravaging China by land, sea, and air. Chennault accepted the challenge and the rank of colonel in the Chinese Nationalist Air Force, and the rest, Norway, is history.
Absolutely, and what a fantastic story. And you know, when you read something as and you research something as horrible as the rape of Nanking, you're just sitting there. You want to fight back. You want to have a go at these bastards. And here you have a man that he watches this onslaught on Nanking in 1937, and it inspires him enormously. And they go on to actually start a fight against the Japanese long before Pearl Harbor. And as a final note, I think General Chennault, he was treated really badly by a couple of West Pointers in the Pentagon. he didn't receive the respect he deserved at the end of this battle. I mean, they were at the forefront on what they did, and they had a fantastic system of reporting back a long time before radar, and they bugged the hell out of the Japanese. The Japanese were almost on target, and there came these P-40 swarms by General Chennault and his men, and they knocked the hell out of the Japanese to enormous losses. So a great man, great team, fantastic flyers.
We hope you like the target or the topic, ladies and gentlemen. It's not something that you like what happened, but I hope you especially those of you that never heard of it before. That's where we get to win. That's something that you can go look at it for yourself now. Like I said, go to the Facebook page. Several documentaries. There's no doubting that it happened when you watch one of those. There's plenty of people were taking pictures, and they must have been Japanese. But I'll tell you what, that's good. Do we even know what we're doing next week yet?
No, but I think when I look down the schedule here, I think actually we're going to do a show on the Second American Civil War, and we'll do that together, Hutch.
All right. Norway, we're out of time. How can people get in touch with you?
I am at Norway for Trump on Twitter and Gab, and a big shout out to the Spreaker chat room. Hi, guys.
Absolutely. I'm Hutch Bailey Jr. on Facebook, Bird's Eye View on Twitter. I want to thank everybody that listened live, and anybody that can become a Cold War Radio patron on the right-hand column of the website, steelcityresistance.com. The Wayne Dupree Show is coming up next. Don't miss that. I'm going up onto the roof and jumping in the helicopter to fly over to Baltimore and get in the studio. No, I don't think so. But anyway, we will be there momentarily. Wayne, do you got the helicopter pad ready? I'm getting ready to fly over to the studio.
Yo, man. Yeah, I got the helicopter ready.
All right, there he is. Okay, got to go, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for letting me into your life.
Goodbye.
For 1 hour. God bless.